In part one, we unpacked Meghan Markle's 2014 blog post, the one where she dismissed royal weddings as a childhood fantasy. But it wasn't just a flippant comment, it was a veiled insult, a superiority flex, and a subtle attempt to mock what she couldn't yet access. We talked about narcissistic posturing, emotional invalidation, and how envy often hides behind feminism. But what happens when a narcissist finally gains access to the very thing they once ridiculed? In this video, part two, we're looking at what came next: the wedding, the identity takeover, and the narcissistic feeding frenzy that followed. Because malignant narcissists don't just want the fantasy, they want to own it, weaponize it, and rewrite it in their image. So if this sounds interesting to you, stick around. But before we begin, here's the intro. Welcome to Revealing the Narc. Join me as I highlight narcissistic traits in celebrities and public figures. Everything here is in my opinion and not professional advice. If you enjoy the analysis, please like and subscribe. So, in part one, I went through this article, and the main thing that I wanted to show in this article was the last few lines here, where Meghan, in a 2014 post, in her TIG blog, so this is allegedly before she met Prince Harry, she said, "Grown women seem to retain this childhood fantasy. Just look at the pomp and circumstance surrounding the royal wedding and endless conversation about Princess Kate." This we really went into it. We dissected it in part one. I'm going to put the link in the description box for this video. But what I want to do today is what happens when someone of this type of personality, and in my opinion, Meghan Markle is a malignant narcissist, what happens when they finally gain access to the very thing they once ridiculed? Because ultimately, it just seems like hypocrisy, but it isn't just hypocrisy. It isn't just a contradiction. This is one of the symptoms of being a malignant narcissist because they don't simply envy others, they mock, minimize, or discredit the things they secretly desire until they can claim it for themselves. She couldn't be Princess Catherine, so she pretended to be above Princess Catherine. This is a classic narcissistic defense mechanism called devaluation before acquisition. This is where they trash something they don't have just to protect their ego from feeling inferior. If they don't have access to it, they pretend it's beneath them until they get it. If they feel excluded from something, admiration, status, tradition, they protect their ego by calling it silly, shallow, or unimportant. Because if they admit they want it, they'd also have to admit they don't have it. But once the door opens and they get inside, the behavior flips, and it flips fast. When Meghan married Harry in 2018, she didn't just participate in the royal fantasy, she made herself the center of it. And to me, I mean, that was going to happen, right? Because she is the bride. But the hypocrisy of it is that the very pageantry she once mocked, the carriages, the veil, the global spotlight, the endless conversation about Princess Kate, as she said, suddenly became a stage. It was a moment for Meghan to be crowned not just a duchess, but a global icon of transformation. And that's the malignant twist. They don't just want what you have, they want to replace you in it. So I want to talk about this a little bit because it really is a scary idea to me. And essentially, this is going from envy to identity takeover. In a nutshell, we've seen Meghan never really have her own persona. She copies a lot of people, right? We've seen her copy Angelina Jolie, Emma Watson, Julia Roberts, Princess Diana. And that's essentially what we're talking about because when you're dealing with a malignant narcissist, it's not enough for them to succeed. They need to outshine the person they feel threatened by. And if we're talking about specifically Princess Diana, this goes back to that I think it was in a book that was recently published where it said that Meghan wanted to continue Diana's legacy, but she only wanted to do it part-time. What that means is she thinks she could continue all the things that Princess Diana had accomplished or was accomplishing, and she only needed to dedicate herself part-time. She didn't need to do it full-time. It puts herself above Princess Diana. And when it comes to Meghan Markle and Princess Catherine, this isn't just rivalry. It looks more like an identity hijack. So, why was Catherine this perfect target for her? Catherine was loved without self promotion. She's consistent and composed. She's publicly trusted. And to someone with narcissistic traits, that kind of effortless admiration doesn't just spark jealousy, it becomes a mission. So, what does this look like? Here are three steps that I believe Megan followed. The first is mirror the target. So, Megan, I believe, began echoing some of Catherine's clothing, styling, and demeanor. I've seen a lot of people when they see Megan interacting with people, they say, "Oh, she's trying to act like Princess Catherine." She may be adopting this soft spoken, polished aesthetic. And it's important to know mirroring isn't flattery, it's how narcissists blur lines between identity and imitation so they can insert themselves into the role. The next thing they do is they undermine the original. They try to shift the public narrative. Megan did this, or she tried to do it on Oprah when she said that Catherine made her cry. Catherine didn't support me. She was trying to subtly dismantle Catherine's character in order to elevate her own. And finally, hijacking the narrative. She reframes herself as the misunderstood royal. She's tried to echo Diana's story, but rebrands herself as American, modern, and media savvy. She launches a narrative through press, interviews, Netflix, Spotify. She basically uses all the tools at her disposal in order to hijack the narrative. This is the narcissist version of a legacy grab, rewriting the role in her own image. But Megan's quest to rewrite the narrative didn't stop with mirroring Catherine's style or undermining her character. I believe that she seemed fixated on the most powerful symbol of Catherine's role, one that couldn't be copied or reframed. And I want to talk about the ring. I'm not here to claim that Meghan was definitely envious of Princess Diana's sapphire, which is now worn by Princess Catherine, but I am noticing a pattern that's raising some questions. Because when someone mocks a tradition and then tries to replicate it and then reframes it as oppressive, that's not just a contradiction. I think that could be something deeper. So I want you all to know that I'm still on the fence about this specifically because I don't have definitive evidence that Megan is envious of the ring. If any of you do, please drop that in the comments. I'm just going to present to you the things that I have found that support that this could be true. So, on the surface, this ring we could say is a piece of jewelry, but most of us don't believe that it's just a piece of jewelry. That ring could be interpreted as a loud visual declaration of who is going to carry Diana's legacy forward. To most people, it's beautiful, but to someone with narcissistic tendencies, it's threatening. And just like that, the ring isn't about jewelry, it's about narrative power. To a narcissist, legacy is currency. It's not just about being part of the system, it's about being the face of it. And that ring, it's not just a family heirloom. It's like William and the rest of the royal family are saying, this is who we trust to carry Diana's legacy. Catherine didn't ask for it. She didn't need a rebrand. She just received it quietly, without fanfare, because her place in the story was already secure. And to someone like Megan, who is deeply invested in storytelling, visual symbolism, and controlling the narrative, that kind of effortless legacy transfer isn't just painful, it's intolerable. We know Megan has tried so many times to attach herself to Diana. One of the weirdest ones being that she allegedly wore Princess Diana's perfume on her first date with Harry. She's echoed a lot of Princess Diana's looks. There was a part in the Oprah interview where she references Princess Diana's interview in a nonchalant way, making the audience create a connection between Diana's world famous interview to Meghan's Oprah interview. But all of that she's done to try to emulate Princess Diana, it wasn't enough. Catherine didn't have to try, she just was. Meghan had to build her Diana connection from scratch, piece by piece, photo by photo. So while Meghan may have tried to claim the emotional legacy, Catherine had the symbol. And in a media driven world, symbols matter, especially to someone who views admiration, image control, and emotional inheritance as central to their identity. One interesting thing is that the engagement rings were framed very differently. Catherine's ring needed no explanation, it carried its own weight. I think even in Spare, well, before Spare, there had been speculation that Harry was the one it was his ring, that it was passed down to Harry. But then in Spare, Harry himself clarifies that it wasn't his ring, it was William's ring. Harry himself in Spare says the papers published florid stories about the moment I realized Willie and Kate were well matched, the moment I appreciated the depth of their love and thus decided to gift Willie the ring I'd inherited from Mummy, the legendary sapphire, a tender moment between brothers, a bonding moment for all three of us, and absolute rubbish. None of it ever happened. I never gave Willie that ring because it wasn't mine to give. He'd already had it. He already had it. He'd asked for it after Mummy died, and I'd been more than happy to let it go. That excerpt does make me wonder what happens behind closed doors. We know that Meghan had a heavy hand in the writing of Spare, allegedly, and in my opinion. So this might be the narrative that she's trying to push forward, that there was no question that Catherine would have gotten the ring. I don't know. But let's go to Meghan's ring. Harry famously designed Meghan's ring using diamonds from Diana's collection, gold from Botswana, and a custom design he helped create. It sounds thoughtful, but Meghan redesigned the ring less than a year later, replacing the thick gold band with a delicate diamond studded micro pave band. This added extravagance that Meghan added could be interpreted as an attempt to make her ring appear more special or luxurious, especially compared to Catherine's inherited iconic ring. It looks maybe that she's trying to one up the symbolism. I did a little bit more research because I remember something about Welsh gold being used for the wedding rings, but it turns out Meghan's engagement ring, it hasn't been publicly or specifically stated to be Welsh gold, but her wedding ring is made of traditional Welsh gold, just like Catherine's. So I'm curious what you all think about all of this. Please drop it in the comments. So if Meghan placed a heavy importance on her acceptance with her engagement ring, she could see not getting it as a symbolic rejection. To someone with narcissistic traits, not being symbolically chosen isn't just disappointing, it's ego threatening, because narcissists don't just want praise, they want public affirmation that they are the chosen one in the story. And that ring, it didn't just live on Catherine's hand, it lived in every photo, every balcony moment. And it was clear the legacy already belongs to someone else. So, what happens when a narcissist doesn't get the symbol? They rewrite the meaning, and that's what Meghan did. She framed the monarchy as archaic, racist, and broken. She declared herself the misunderstood heroine. She rebranded her image from royal bride to feminist disruptor, and she pushed forward her own Diana comparisons on her terms. She didn't just walk away, she flipped the script. I wasn't chosen, then the system is corrupt. Here are some final thoughts. Meghan may have tried to become Diana in spirit, but Catherine had the crown jewel literally. And to someone who craves status, legacy, and narrative control, a missing ring isn't just jewelry, it's proof. Proof that someone else was chosen, that someone else was trusted, that someone else got the role she wanted and got it without the performance. And for someone obsessed with image, silence can be the loudest rejection of all. So I believe that's what the ring meant in Meghan's world. But you don't need a crown or a title to know what symbolic rejection feels like. If you've ever had a narcissist in your life, you might recognize this next part all too well. I'm going to go into a couple of examples that this could be seen or you may have experienced in your own life. Here's the first scenario. You graduate from college, you're the first in your family. You print out a beautiful photo of you in your cap and gown and give it to your narcissistic parent. They thank you, but they never display it. Instead, they keep a photo of your siblings' high school prom front and center on the mantle. That graduation photo represents your success, independence, and growth beyond their control, which threatens their identity as a superior one. So instead of celebrating you, they ignore or subtly minimize it. Here's a second scenario. You're getting married and you pick a dress that feels perfect for you. You show a narcissistic mother or sister and they say, "It's fine. I just always imagined you in something a little more flattering." Or, "Oh, that's brave of you to wear something so bold." The dress isn't just fabric, it's your moment, your joy, your spotlight, and they can't stand not being the center of it. So they cut it down just enough to make you second guess your excitement. Here's another scenario. You throw a first birthday party for your child. A narcissistic in law shows up with an over the top gift, not for the child, but clearly meant to upstage you. They post selfies from the party with captions like, "I'm so proud to celebrate my legacy." In this scenario, your child becomes a symbolic extension of power for the narcissist. They insert themselves into the meaning of the moment to recenter the attention. They hijack what should be yours emotionally and symbolically frame themselves as more important. Let's get into another scenario. You finally finish a passion project, a book, a painting, or a business, and you share it with your narcissistic friend or partner. They say, "I've always thought about doing something like that. It's cute, not what I expected, but good for you." Your creation is a symbol of self expression and growth, but to them, it feels like you're trying to surpass them. So they try to minimize it or claim spiritual ownership of the idea. And let's get to a final example. You give a meaningful, beautiful gift to a narcissistic parent, something you picked with intention, something you hoped would reflect your bond. They put it in storage, or they regift it, or later say they never really understood why you chose it. The gift wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol of your love, thoughtfulness, or emotional growth. And they reject it because accepting it would mean acknowledging your value. What is the common thread in all of these? Malignant narcissists will withhold affirmation from symbolic milestones. They'll reframe or hijack your joy. They mock what they envy if they can't control it. And they undermine symbols that make you feel proud or seen. Because to them, meaning equals power. And if they didn't choose the moment or if it doesn't center them, they'll find a way to invalidate it subtly or loudly. So let's get into Megan's wedding as a narcissistic feeding frenzy. I honestly hadn't heard of this until I started researching it for this video. And let's describe it. So, malignant narcissists experience periods of intense validation as feeding frenzies. It's a psychological high, a rush of attention, admiration, and control, where the narcissist consumes praise, rewrites roles, and places themselves at the center of everything. It's moments where they inhale admiration, attention, and control like oxygen. So, how did we see it with Megan and the wedding? There was total narrative control. That it was completely centered on the brand of her. And we know that even just based on her speech at her wedding, it was a jumping point for her to launch her new brand. Another way that she controlled the narrative is the unknown guest list. It's customary to release the guest list of the wedding, but Megan decided she didn't want to do that. We heard also about demands that became headlines. We heard about Tiara Gate, where Meghan allegedly wanted the same crown that Princess Eugenie had been promised for Princess Eugenie's wedding. We also know Meghan wanted to scent the chapel. And there are so many stories of her demanding things that were over the top. She then used people as a prop. She had a celebrity heavy guest list. And I often wonder if having her mom sit alone at the chapel was her way of using her mom as a prop. And then finally, we get into the Oprah interview where the flip begins. That's when she said, "Our real wedding was in the backyard. That wedding was a spectacle for the world." She wanted the pageantry as long as she could control the script. So, what happens after the feeding frenzy? There's withdrawal and collapse. When the attention fades, so does their emotional regulation. The narrative turns dark. I was silenced. They didn't protect me. There's a narrative rewrite. It reframes herself as a reluctant participant, positions herself as a victim and not the architect. Third, there's blame and scapegoating. The staff, the firm, Princess Catherine, all these people became antagonists. It externalizes the failure to preserve Meghan's ego. And finally, there's a redemption arc. Podcast launches, Netflix deals, but it's not growth, it's a rebrand, and she's not very good at doing it. Ultimately, envy is the fuel. Malignant narcissists are defined by envy, not just of success, but of the effortless love others receive. Catherine doesn't chase admiration. She earns it through consistency and grace. And that's Meghan's trigger. To a narcissist, it's unbearable to watch someone be adored for just being themselves. So they mock it, they mirror it, undermine it, and when that doesn't work, they try to burn it down. So, final recap, let's look at this narcissistic cycle in action. In 2014, she mocked it with her blog post in the TIG. In 2018, she performed it, a global spectacle with total control over the narrative. And in 2021, she tried to destroy it. She claimed that she was silenced and it was all performative. That's not evolution, that's the narcissistic arc. And remember that line, grown women seem to retain this childhood fantasy? That wasn't just a blog post. It was a prelude, a warning of exactly how this story would unfold. So I'm curious to know what you all think about this. Please drop it in the comments. If this video was interesting to you, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you'll know every time that I drop a new video. I'm going to include the link to part 1 in the description of this video. If there are any topics between part 1 and part 2 that you believe should be explored more, please let me know and drop that in the comments. I appreciate you all for listening, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye, everybody.